Welcome to the Port Commission meeting for September 5th. We'll open the public meeting, and our first item is roll call. Let the record show that Commissioner McCauley and Robbins are present, as is Commissioner Briscoe. Are you there, Commissioner?
Yes, Commissioner Robbins, I'm here.
So let the record show all three commissioners are here. Our first item of business is our advisory committee notifications, and we're having them all next week. We have the Marine Advisory Committee here in this room at 6 p.m. on Tuesday, September 12th. And 2 days later, we have at 9:30 a.m. we have our TAC meeting, Technical Airport Advisory Committee, at 9:30 at the ARF building. And that evening at 5 o'clock in the same building, we have our BIAC meeting. We have some new members of those committees, so that'll be their first meeting, as I understand. And they're all open to the public, and everyone's welcome at those meetings. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
There's no one signed up, Commissioner.
Is there anyone that forgot to sign up that has anything they want to speak about? Seeing none, we'll move to our consent agenda. Gentlemen, have you had a chance to read your consent agenda? Bobby?
I have no questions, so I'm good.
Commissioner Briscoe?
I had a question on C and E, items C and E, but those were answered by staff prior to the meeting, so I'm good to go.
I didn't hear that. I'm sorry. No questions. Oh, you have no questions?
No.
Okay. Commissioner McCauley?
No, sir.
Hearing none, all those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record show that passes 3-0. Favor. Our next item is we're going to have some presentations today, and the first one is the Airport Master Plan update.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Emily Philippi, Airside Operations Supervisor, here today along with our consultant, AECOM, to present to you just an update on the Airport Master Plan. So Mr. John Yarnish will be going into some more detail here very shortly, but the airport does view this master plan update as a very non-controversial update. There's a lot of items in there, kind of the lookout of the 5, 10, 20 years that a lot of the facilities are in place, and the ones that are going to be needed, again, are just not controversial items that we foresee a lot of public input into. But one area that is outside of that is the runway safety area. A small portion of that is currently out of compliance on the north end of the airfield. So with that being said, I will turn it over to our consultant, Mr. Yarnish, to provide you a little more details on our progress. Thank you.
Commissioners, thank you.
Welcome.
All right, I'm here to talk about the development alternatives that have arisen out of the master plan in response to the forecast of aviation and the FAA's changing safety and development needs.
John, why don't you introduce yourself for the folks on TV?
Okay. I'm John Yarnish. I'm with AECOM. I'm an aviation project manager, aviation planner. We're developing the airport master plan for the Bellingham International Airport for the next 20-year look at development and things that are needed at the airport. One of the things that has come up is the RSA compliance. The RSA in this master plan, runway safety area is what we're talking about. And just a brief explanation of what the runway safety area is. Runway safety area is a prepared, graded area at the end of a runway. On a commercial service runway, it's to be 1,000 feet long, 500 feet wide, centered on the runway. The purpose of the runway safety area is to receive aircraft that have overrun the paved runway for some reason onto a surface where they can come to a stop without endangering the lives of the people on the airplane. So it's an important safety consideration developed by the FAA in looking at various aircraft overruns over the years. The current situation is that the runway safety area at the Bellingham on the runway 16 end is not in compliance by an area of about just 1,600 square feet, about the size of an average house or a small house. It's the red piece down there on the corner that you can see on the slide that has to be brought into compliance. When the runway was extended, there wasn't enough room to put that in, and the FAA didn't have the mandate from Congress at that time to meet full runway safety area compliance. They do now. So what are we doing? We're looking at alternatives that range from doing nothing to using an engineered materials, and we're looking at whether these would meet FAA criteria. We have to maintain commercial service at Bellingham, which means no decrease in the available runway length. There's environmental considerations on a couple of the alternatives that we looked at. We have to look at constructability. How long would the runway, this single runway airport, how long would the runway have to be closed to make things happen? What are the impacts on the community, and what are the cost and financial impacts? And I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, but one of the reasons that we don't want to tie up the runway is the runway length at Bellingham is marginal for the fleet that's driving there. And when I say marginal, I mean that if we cut the length of the runway during construction or in meeting the RSA, we reduce the runway length to less than 6,700 feet. And the aircraft taking off in the destinations are going to suffer a reduction in their ability to serve the communities that they currently serve. That's why that's important. So the first thing we looked at was a do-nothing, which we called an administrative solution. And that is to petition the FAA to find a way to let the situation as it stands stand. And we also looked at taking an alternative and building a retaining wall down at the end and maximizing the existing RSA, which cuts down the non-compliant piece to way less than it is today, about halves it. The FAA can't do that. They can't approve an airport master plan operations on a runway with a non-compliant RSA. So the alternative of that was deemed to be impractical. We then looked at extending onto the WashDOT right-of-way, WashDOT federal highways right-of-way for Interstate 5. And that's sort of, it requires that the WashDOT and federal highways return a piece of land, a portion of land, to allow the RSA to be extended that was originally deeded from the port to the federal highways for the construction of I-5. So there's a piece, and the deed says that the property cannot be used in any way that deters from the operations of Bellingham Airport. So this would require a return of that property. When we've been talking to Federal Highways, WashDOT, FAA, we've had several meetings about this. This topic has been discussed with them and considered. We also looked at building a cantilevered structure on port property that raised the RSA 17 feet above the current deck of Interstate 5, sort of like a bridge would be, so that we didn't interfere with the rights of the interstate to move back and forth, but we did provide for the full RSA. These next alternatives will explain why we did that. There's a concept called declared distances where you remark the end of the runway, shorten the runway so that you can declare that you've got the full 1,000 feet. In this case, let me get the cursor going here. We're talking about from here to here. So we're talking about taking 110 feet off the end of that runway, which makes it less than 6,700 feet, which won't make the airlines happy. They'll have to revise the way that they serve. And then we also looked at going down there as we had done in the previous and building the retaining wall and displacing that threshold. That still got us below the 6,700 feet. So these two alternatives shorten the runway to an unacceptably shortened length. So then we looked at the same two. When I talk about these, there's always going to be two. One is without building the structure to maximize the current RSA, and the other is to build the structure. in this case, we said, okay, if we want to maintain the 6,700 feet, what if we relocated the threshold and then built a new portion, 167 feet on the other end? And what that does is it just moves the RSA problem from the 16 end to the 34 end, because you can see where the blue line is here, where my cursor is running. That's the end of the RSA. If we extend it out, we get into Alderwood, and we get into some major issues with land movement and grading issues out there. It also moves the runway in closer to the community down there and does kicks off an environmental process that is going to take a long time, because there's a environmentally sensitive area right here at the end of the runway that has, Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a rare grass plant that grows out there, so that the environmental issues involved in anything of moving and extending the runway in that direction become problematic. At the request of the WashDOT, what if their question was, what if we just moved the runway? So we looked at shifting the runway 800 feet to the west. Shifting it 800 feet to the west begins a process that's going to take a decade to get through the environmental, the site preparation, the design, and the construction and reopen. And during that decade, the FAA is going to insist that we fix the current RSA in order to meet their mandate. So this isn't a practical solution. There was also a suggestion that we reorient, sort of cant the runway to the side in order to just move it till we had the full 1,000 feet. Again, doing this moves us into the wetland areas, and it's probably a decade of work trying to get the approvals, the design and construction underway for this. So this is not practicable either. And for the same reason, FAA is going to insist that the RSA be brought into compliance while we're doing the planning and the design and the construction. The last thing we looked at is a concept of engineered materials. And what this is you build a bed out there and you put an engineered concrete in it. I don't know if you're familiar with the truck overruns on major roadways. That's basically what this is. If an aircraft overruns, it runs into that pavement, it sinks into it and it slows it down and stops it. This is what stopped the airplane with Mike Pence in from running into the roadway in New York this winter whenever it happened. The problem with EMAS, the engineered materials solution, is that it doesn't last a long time, and so you're in a thing where every 5 to 7 years you have to replace the EMAS, and anytime anything runs into it, a truck, an aircraft, or anything, it crushes the concrete, and now you have to replace it. So it's a long-term financial commitment in order to get this solution to the RSA. So where we're at right now is we believe the most practical solution to this is to negotiate with WashDOT and get that little corner of the formerly owned port property back and get the RSA into compliance on the runway 16 end. Build a retaining wall, move the dirt around and get the RSA and the airport in a safe operation that meets FAA standards. So that's a recommendation we're making in the master plan.
One
Yes,
quick question. What year did we redo the runway?
Redo the runway?
Well, we resurfaced it. We spent a lot of money on it.
That was 4 or 5 years ago. Pardon?
2010.
Was it 10?
2010, yeah.
So 7 years ago. And was this runoff length of the runway a problem at that time?
When did Congress change it?
When the runway was
Yeah, that's the question I'm looking at. When was the rule changed? After
rule-
2010?
Yes. And even when we did the previous master plan, there's documentation in the files where the FAA has said, yeah, we realize that there's a small corner, but it's not a big deal.
We realized that in 2010?
No, this was written back when the runway was extended, which would have been in the 90s, maybe even the late 80s. Pardon? 94, okay. And the FAA's regional office as well as as well as headquarters office, both looked at it and said at that time that they didn't have a problem with it the way that it was, and they granted what they call a modification on it.
So what year did it become a problem?
I think it's maybe in the last 5 to 10 years, the Congress mandated that this was something the FAA had to do, is bring all of the runway safety areas into compliance. That ranged from the Alaskan airports that were, way out of compliance, built out into the sea on a 150-foot wide runway built on a 175-foot long dirt platform. But the FAA has been bringing everything into compliance. We were told at the one meeting that in the Northwest Mountain region, Bellingham's one of the only airports that isn't in full compliance at this point. When we did the last master plan, we addressed this issue, and they looked at their paperwork and said, yeah, that's fine, but now we're into a different situation.
John?
I think the date we're looking for is December 31st of 2015. That's when the FAA first told us that we were out of compliance and needed to fix it.
Oh, okay, so it was well after us doing that. Okay.
From the way I understand it, was 2005 is when the mandate came into in order, and it was by the end of 2015 that all airports had to be in compliance. So when we did that extension in 2010, that was a mandate to get that fully functional at that time. However, kind of going back into records, that was agreed upon with the FAA, that it's a very small portion. We're talking about 1.5% out of the total runway safety area that's out of compliance. And to how I understand it, was a handshake deal of, hey, it's such a small portion that we'll go ahead and allow this. However, that is no longer an acceptable version at that time, that we have to be in compliance with that fully
Guys that shook
operational.
hands are no longer there, or
Agree, yeah. Management is no longer here at the airport.
I'd never heard of it, so.
Yeah,
it
it
never
was
came
just
to us.
something that,
So commissioners, in 2005 as part of the appropriations process, so you don't have statutes, you just have public laws, because they never codify the appropriations. So in 2005, the appropriations for the Department of Transportation was under Public Law 109-115. That was appropriations, it was a couple other departments too, Department of Transportation and a few other federal agencies. The appropriations bill included a mandate that by December 31st, 2015, the FAA achieve RSA compliance at all FAA certified airports. And the FAA then, in 2015, has indicated to the port that strict compliance is required. That's how they read the Public Law 109-115. And as Emily said here, you're dealing with the property on WashDOT is about 1,500 square feet out of 500,000 square feet. So you're dealing with about 1.5% of the overall land mass of the RSA is in the property that the port formerly deeded to the Washington State Department of Transportation in 1972. So
what's WashDOT say?
They haven't expressed approval or disapproval to this point. They've said they'd had to take it back in. They were in favor of moving the runway, or moving Alderwood Drive because it would be easier. At this point, they're sort of a mum on it at the moment.
Let me understand, it's not going to affect the highway at all.
No, the reason that they've expressed for having an issue with it is they have a mandate to maintain 30 feet from the fog line of the interior lane to any obstruction. And so if they, in this particular case, decide to add another lane or two on the outside of the road, it could be a problem. They could add it to the inside.
Another lane or two to the freeway.
To the freeway in the southbound lanes. So they don't want to give this up, and then their initial position was they didn't want to give this up until they were certain that they weren't going to need that property for a lane or two. I think it's 2 lanes would then have that structure that we put in within 30 feet. I think it'd be 27 feet. So.
it's about about 46 feet now
Yeah,
off of the fog line.
yeah.
And so if you look at the WashDOT design manual, they have a mandate to how they design safety areas, essentially the same theory.
Right.
Some car runs off the road. Obviously, they have alternatives because they
Right.
build walls and stuff down in Seattle.
They
And
have
so
a-
if they added a couple lanes, it could theoretically interfere with their safety area, or maybe even one lane. So that's kind of the issue.
If they add the lanes to the outside of
We
the,
looked
of
at
the
the-
highway.
We looked at the TIP, which is the adopted plan in this county for the next 10 years, and it doesn't show any plan to add a second lane or third lane to I-5.
So
So
your
that's a s-
suggestion is what? We work with WashDOT?
Yeah, that's the recommendation. It's the least expensive, least disruptive, the most straightforward way to do that. And the FAA is working with WashDOT and with the port. There's been several meetings of coordinating this. WashDOT and Federal Highways issued a statement previously that said they didn't want to do anything that interfered with their mandate, but they didn't say no. And the FAA said, well, if they didn't say no, let's keep moving forward on them.
So,
Okay, John, it's the operational changes that the airlines would need to add would be just the landing distance? This wouldn't, if you were using declared distances, it wouldn't affect their takeoff?
No, the takeoff distances with the declared distance would affect only landings at the moment.
Just landings?
But it would still require them to operate on a field that was less than 6,700 feet. The
And-
airlines have rules and then unwritten rules, and 6,700 feet is marginal, and when you talk to the airlines, if you tell them you're going to have 6,600 feet, they start to balk and look at things like weight restrictions, leave a few passengers behind, leave a little fuel behind, whatever.
Well, that's what I was kind of wondering, is like, if the planes are coming here, they're not bringing cargo, they're gonna bring people and some luggage. So have you asked the airlines if 6,600 is really gonna be a big deal for them?
They've expressed that they don't want the runway shortened.
Well, sure, right?
I mean, that's
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
The EMAS is $3 million, the engineered solution is $3 million?
roughly 3 million to install, and then roughly the same price every 5 to 7 years. Presuming nothing runs off the runway in the meantime.
Commissioners, just a couple quick things to add here. Last week, we did brief Congressman Larson on the issue, and we're also going to brief our Susan Del Bene, and then we'll brief our local state delegation so that they're up to speed on this. Frank's office has done a memo, a pretty extensive memo on what our legal options are, and I think that memo gives us a lot of leverage in our discussions with the state. It looks like we have a pretty strong case since we have those deed restrictions saying that their highway can't interfere with our airport. So we think we have a pretty strong case, and not that we need to take it to court, but having that as a backstop gives us some good leverage in negotiations with them.
I wouldn't be surprised if the EMAS wasn't the answer on this, to be honest with you. Because the restrictions obviously aren't gonna make any sense. Moving the runway makes no sense. Extending it down the other end makes less sense than adding 1,600 square feet on the north end. But if WashDOT's, sticking to their guns on their right-of-way, which if they wanted to pay for, see where I'm going here, right? If they wanted to pay for the EMAS, we're done.
The maintenance on the EMAS is pretty high, though. isn't it?
Yeah, it just
The
seems
maintenance-
like
The maintenance and constant
It's concrete.
replacement.
What is it?
it just seems like the simplest
why do you have to
solution
replace
is
it?
1,500 square feet of right-of-way that's never going to be used.
Well, I mean, that's what we would say, but we're not,
Exactly.
not the Department of Transportation. This is probably such small potatoes for their overall management plan. They probably don't even, they probably just want this to go away, but.
I think nationally what you'd find is EMAS is an acceptable solution when there's absolutely no other
When there's no other
solution.
option.
It's
This might
it's
be
the
a silly-
solution of last resort is if
This might be a silly question. Have we ever used a runoff area for anything?
Yeah, yeah.
We've run off it a time or two.
Not with the commercial aircraft, but
Ones do it
GA
all the
aircraft
time.
have run off at a time or two, and when a GA aircraft run off, you got to replace it nonetheless.
So why is the concrete used versus, what they use for trucks? Is it a weight issue?
Yeah, it's a weight and a stoppage issue. The aircraft going down at the end, it just needs a different type of material.
Slow it down. Oh.
And-
Net? Can
And
we
if
put a net
I'm-
up there? It works for the Navy.
I'm
Sorry,
sorry?
what-
Can we use a net? I mean, it works for the Navy. I'm seriously, it works for the Navy. Why can't we use a net?
And I would like to add that we did have, during my time here at BLI, there was a Horizon aircraft that did go off that specific end of the runway. It was just a very minor, they came to rest, no injuries or anything like that, but we have had commercial airlines go off on that end. And also, one issue with the EMAS, especially for BLI, which is a single runway airport, if there is any vehicle or if an aircraft does go into that, our runway is completely shut down, not only to remove that piece of equipment or aircraft, and then also to get it repaired and replaced. So there is that operational aspect to it as well, along with the very costly maintenance.
Yeah, that's-
So I have a couple questions. Looking at this in front of me, this is all over a piece of dirt that nothing is on. It's basically right-of-way ownership. I can't believe our federal agencies can't get their head out of the clouds and figure this out simply. I mean, I don't believe they're ever going to build 2 lanes to the south of the existing I-5, because if you go on in a little bit further to the south, going down the freeway, you're going to run into all kinds of problems with having lanes on that side of the highway. They can't even fix the roads we have now, so I don't know where they're going to come up with the money to build the other 2 lanes to start with. This is more muscle flexing, if you ask me, than anything, and it's ridiculous in this commissioner's mind that WisDOT is not just saying, okay, look, let's just do this. I mean, I don't want to put EMAS. I don't want to spend any money. I think us spending money as a port on an airport that's functioning fine for a little teeny square of dirt that people want to fight over is ridiculous. I'm not for EMAS, not for anything. I'm for the way we leave it where it is now and have WisDOT deal with the FAA and figure this out, because this is in my mind is absolutely ridiculous. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, we have a couple of other things. I'll run through them real quick. I've exceeded the 10 minutes Sunil
Oh,
told
go
me I
ahead.
had, but
That's okay, John. You started with a statement that we're planning for 20 years, which I think you said about 6 years ago. So let's hear it.
we also took a look at the terminal. If you'll recall, when we did the last master plan, we said to continue to develop the terminal in the direction that it was moving, but the demand for terminal has decreased and gone away. So expanding the terminal is not something that's in the plan for the next 20 years. The passenger loads won't take it. However, there is a plan for on-demand expansion. And what on-demand expansion means is if another airline comes in and says, we need some space, what can we do? Where can we build it? Well, as we found out, without the demand pushing the terminal in the direction that we had shown, caused a relocation of all the general aviation hangars and a large expense for both the port and the hangar owners. So we looked at an alternative of moving it to the north, turning the corner between the FedEx hangar and the current parking lots. So if there's an on-demand by an airline that wants to come in and build a terminal, that would be the go-to location in this master plan. And that allows all the GA hangars and stuff to stay where they're at. We talked about improving taxiway locations. What this is just straightening them out, making them 90-degree angles and putting them in a position where the aircraft can exit the runway as quickly as possible. Getting rid of the legacy pavements that are at angles that aren't exactly useful for the aircraft taking off and landing at the airport. Continue GA development. There's an RFP out that's been responded to continue to build GA development down. This is the old National Guard building and to go south to Oakley Hangar in the middle is to just continue that that's from the previous master plan. Fuel farm expansion is being talked about right now. The current fuel farm's in a position, in a condition that it needs major repairs, but it also needs to be expanded. And so we're recommending to expand it down where the current fuel trucks are located. There's a piece of concrete paving down there to put a couple of additional fuel tanks in and move the fueling operation down onto the area between the general aviation and the current GA terminal. And then there's a bunch of alternatives, not alternatives, things that are required that don't have alternatives. Runway shoulders and blast pads have to be beside the runway, obviously. Upgrading the lighting to LED fixtures, that's got to be alongside the runway and the taxiways. Got to complete the airport's interior service roads so that we can get to aircraft or emergency situations that are inside the fence. Put in some new perimeter and wildlife fencing, and preserve the right to have an instrument approach to runway 34. So at the end of the day, the airport's footprint won't look that different, but there'll be improvements throughout the airport. And that's where we're at with this moment.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
John, so I don't think you were here, but we had a conversation about improvements at the fuel farm to the pavements. And at the time, I asked whoever staff were here, why don't we just move it somewhere else inside? Why are you suggesting it? Because when I asked that question, the answer was we're not doing that. Why would you suggest we move the fuel farm inside the location you pointed out?
Well, the fuel farm needs a couple of things. It needs to be in a location where the fuel trucks can get to it and then get to the aircraft, and they're not able to go outside the fence. So every time you take a fuel truck outside the fence, you're in essence violating the law because the fuel trucks aren't street legal. You also have to have people at the gates to allow them out and in. So you need a location where a delivery truck can pull up, make a delivery, and get out. And then you need to have the fuel trucks on airfield so that they can fill the trucks and then go fill the airplanes. So the existing location requires too much. It's in disrepair, and it's not the ideal location because the fuel trucks do have to go outside the fence, and it's a problem. So moving it to the new location, one, it lowers the cost of the relocation, because there's already a concrete pad there and there's already drains there to absorb any fuel spills and do an oil water separation type of thing. And so that location can be used not only for above ground fuel tanks, but also for fuel trucks. And it's just a simpler delivery and distribution method there.
So looking at, I think you can almost see it on this photograph right there. It's where the fuel trucks park now.
Right.
It wouldn't require expansion of that pad.
It would require some of those fuel trucks to be repositioned.
Okay.
But one of the things you have there is you have the concrete pad, and the fuel tanks need to sit on concrete, not asphalt. And so by having the concrete pad there that's properly, that's strong enough for the fuel tanks, considering, and Emily and Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a development that's going to be funded by a private entity. Mm-hmm. So by cutting back the development costs, you get a better facility.
All right. Thanks, John.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, John.
All right, thank you.
Bob, everything before we.
I do have one question. And when you spoke to the fuel farm being funded by a private organization, did I hear correctly that if it was to be moved, that is funded by someone else, not the port?
Yes. Emily's going to add to that, yes.
Yes, that is the route that we would be proceeding into if that was the agreement that was going to go forward, that it would not be port funds for the initial investment.
Who currently operates that fuel farm? I'm not up to speed on that.
So the port, that is our land, so it's leased out. That Allegiant Airlines has 2 of the tanks there, and then our 2 FBOs, which is Bellingham Aviation Services and Command Aviation, operate that facility. So we inspect it, but they do all the upkeep and maintenance. The only maintenance that we do, there's an oil water separator along with the fencing and the lighting, and the pavement is the port's.
So we're assuming those folks would be the private groups that would fund the moving of this farm.
So that old site would just be decommissioned, and so it would just be the infrastructure at the new site, which would be on that concrete pad is where we're hoping it would go. So the pavement and everything's already there, so it would just be the tanks and any of the infrastructure that's needed.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thanks.
No other questions? Thank you very much, John.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Michael Hogan, Public Affairs Administrator. I'm going to give a quick update on the 2017 legislative session, but before I get started, I'd like to welcome Senator Lisa Wellman to the Port of Bellingham. Senator Wellman's going to be giving a presentation on public banking, an informational presentation, but Senator Wellman is a freshman senator from the Mercer Island area, represents Mercer Island, Bellevue, and some the surrounding area, and she also sits on the Energy, Environment, and Telecommunications Committee, which is a key committee for the MOTCA funding. So we welcome the opportunity to talk about the 2017 legislative session, and in particular, some of the MOTCA funding and how it's impacted our ability to get our work done. So the 2017 legislative session was a record as far as the operating budget. $43.7 billion. That was about 16-17% bigger than the last budget, which was also a record. And there was a lot of focus on the McCleary decision. That was the state Supreme Court decision to fully fund basic education. So within the operating budget, there's $7.3 billion in new funding for schools. The Supreme Court set to rule this month or make a decision this month whether that meets the intent of the McCleary decision. But basically, it was a bit of a levy swap, so it raised the state property tax and lowers local school levies. Most of Whatcom County will see decrease if for property owners, decrease in taxes. The exception is the Blaine School District, so apologies, Commissioner Briscoe. That was the funding for the McCleary decision, and a big and it was it took many years and lots of work. So hopefully that is fixed. As far as the transportation budget, there was $8.4 billion appropriated. As far as Whatcom County projects, it was a continuation of the Connecting Washington package, which was approved in 2015, 2017. We had some good work done by our McBride Associates, our lobbyists down there, to help prioritize some key projects, particularly the northbound on-ramp at Bakerview for the port that services the airport and truck routes, and also the Orchard Street connector, just to show you on a map what those look like, those 2 projects. So it doesn't, what it did is there was new language in this transportation budget where projects that, it's one thing to be on a list, it's another to be the priority for getting the project done. So what the 2017-2019 budget did was there was language if projects haven't gotten started or for whatever reason haven't been started, it moves down to the next projects that are ready to go. So the Bakerview project was ranked as the 3rd project in line, and the Orchard Street, the 4th project in line. So we're high up on the priority list, and so that's good news for moving those projects forward.
Of course, if they had to put another lane in the freeway, this ramp would come out, right?
We better not make sure they don't see this presentation. As far as the capital budget, a lot of focus on the capital budget. As you as you know, that budget has not been passed yet. There's been a lot of rumors about when it might get passed. I've heard the latest rumor is in November when the Congress reports for Assembly days but we know there's people working on it. It was a political issue tied to the Hearst water decision, not passing the capital budget. What we do know is there's significant impacts to Whatcom County and to the Port of Bellingham. You can see on the Bellingham Herald today. This was from the online edition, talking about the Bellingham Detox Center and the status of that facility, what's going to happen. It relies heavily on the passage of the capital budget, as well as the Whatcom Community College, Western Washington University, Bellingham Technical College, all have big projects. There's stormwater projects, fish passage projects, a whole range of impacts in Whatcom County. Specific to the port, we're doing a big project in Blaine Harbor. We did have grant funding through the State Clean Vessel Program to install new pump outs, which is good for Puget Sound. We had to cancel that project, unfortunately, due to uncertainty about the state capital budget. It costed us a $3,000 change order to pull that out of the current project that's tied to a larger project that has been talked about. When and if the funding does become available, there will be, extra costs related to mobilization, bidding the project, all those sorts of things. So it was unfortunate, but that's kind of an immediate impact that we felt. As far as MOTCA funding in the capital budget, there's funding for Blaine Marina, for GP West, for the Cornwall Avenue landfill and R.G. Haley, the GP West, Cornwall landfill and R.G. Haley, all on the downtown waterfront. I put up, you can see the pictures to the right. Key to that funding is number one, doing the cleanup and the environmental work, but we're seeing a huge influx of private investment as we've moved through that process and gotten the property cleaned up and ready for private development. Over the past year, probably about $35 million in public and private commitments down on the downtown waterfront alone. But there's a lot more work to do. The issues we have up in Blaine, a lot more work on the waterfront, ongoing work down in Fairhaven Shipyard. All those are really important to our community for getting that property back on the tax rolls into productive use and replacing those jobs that lost when the traditional industries left. I also put Swift Creek. That's a big issue that the county's been dealing with that has funding in the capital budget. One of the projects, the Squalicum Waterway maintenance dredging. We've been working with the Army Corps of Engineers to get federal funding for maintenance dredging. With limited federal funding, states like Oregon, North Carolina have started contributing funds to help maintain these waterways. The Squalicum Waterway is critical for the operations down at Bellingham Cold Storage and all the tenants. There's about 2,000 people that rely on that waterway for their jobs. And you'll see this winter, Bellingham Cold Storage is going to have their fishing ships out in Bellingham Bay, and they're going to have to lighter them in, paying hundreds of thousands of extra dollars because the waterway hasn't been maintained since 2004, and it continues to silt in and continues to be a problem. So at any rate, there's $750,000 following a model that's been done down in Oregon to help supplement the Army Corps of Engineers, the federal government, to get this critical maintenance dredging done, and that's tied up right now in the capital budget. So a wide range of projects that are impacted both in Whatcom County and at the Port of Bellingham. Just briefly, some of the key legislation that was passed that impacts port operations, the Real ID Act. Washington was one of several states that was out of compliance with the driver's license, and so it was going to be a big impact at the airport because the FAA was going to require licenses to be in compliance. So we passed legislation to be in compliance. Solar incentives, you can see the pictures. That's ITEC's new solar panel manufacturing facilities. The solar incentives, big benefit to Whatcom County. It extended the incentives for 8 years. It also went from residential to businesses. So good news for ITEC and the other solar manufacturers in the state of Washington.
Did the incentives change at all or just extend it?
They extended it and they increased it, so if you businesses used to not be able to get in on the incentives, I think they changed the amount of money that's available, so it runs out. So if you're interested in solar, now would be a good time to call up and get it done while there's enough money to fund it. But talking with the folks at ITech, they were. Representative Morris has been a long-term proponent of this, and they were really, really thankful for that legislation and see, continuing really strong demand for their panels. The Public Records Acts, there was two bills passed, one dealing with the administration of the public records, another allowing governments to get nominal fees for expenses related to those acts. Tourism funding, the state of Washington doesn't have a statewide tourism marketing campaign or board or organization, so this puts, I think it was $500,000 to put together a stakeholder group and start coming up with some recommendations for how that might look and what the benefits would be statewide. And then there was one other Supreme Court decision related to the Open Public Meetings Act, which affects ports when what can be discussed related to real estate transactions in executive session. So I'm sure our council will be briefing you in depth on that in the weeks and months to come, but another key issue that happened this session. So that's a quick update on the legislative session and how it impacts Whatcom County and the Port of Bellingham. We'll continue to keep you updated, but if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Commissioner Briscoe, any questions?
Well, yeah, I have one. How did Blaine get omitted?
So the pump outs. You're talking about the pump outs in Blaine Marina?
No, we'll talk about the school taxes first.
Yeah, so
I just curious how one district out of all of them gets left out.
Well, so basically what it is the state increased the amount of money that's for the statewide property tax by 81 cents per $1,000 in assessed value, but they put a cap on the amount that for local levies for most things in the school district. So if you have a high local levy, for example, Bellingham has a high local levy for Bellingham school districts. That levy, even though your statewide property tax goes up, your levy for the Bellingham school district is going to go down because it caps it at I think it's I could get the exact number for you, but it puts a cap on it. So in most areas in Whatcom County, they had more funding in the local school levies, so that's going to, for the property tax owners, that's going to come down. Blaine School District didn't have that, their reduction, there wasn't that much of a local school district levy in effect, so you're not going to get as much of a reduction to offset the 81 cent increase in the statewide property tax.
Commissioner Blaine wasn't the only one. There's a number of counties or jurisdictions around the state that that won't see a decrease. And those are school districts that were already below the maximum threshold that was set versus a school district that's over the threshold now has to come down to it.
Correct. And of note is the property tax increase kicks in 2018. So everyone's going to get a big property tax increase, 81 cents per $1,000 in 2018. The local levy, school levy reduction doesn't kick in until 2019. So there will be a bump in tax in 2018 before, in most of Whatcom County, it'll come down in 2019 and out years, not in Blaine though.
Thank you for explaining that, Mike. The other thing I'd like to point out is the pump out system in Blaine. We do still have a pump out system. Mm-hmm. I don't want folks to misunderstand that we do not have one up there. We do have a system. It was just we were going to replace and update. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, Commissioner McCauley, any questions? Okay, hearing none, thank you very much. Mike?
All right, well, with that, I would like to welcome Senator Wellman to give a presentation on public banking. Oh, yeah. Is it?
Just put it on started from the beginning. It isn't. There we go.
And then I think you can just use
Okay,
the arrows.
super.
Welcome, Senator.
Thank you so much. So Lisa Wellman from the 41st Legislative District, and I am part of an fiscal infrastructure task force that is looking at a state bank. Let's call it a state bank. It could be something else, but basically we're talking about public funding and how we can move forward as far as the state is concerned. You know, this is my first year in the state legislature, and as a businesswoman, I had been part of the Washington Business Alliance, which was created by Howard Behar from Starbucks and David Giuliani from Clarisonic Sonicare. And we were looking at the projections for how the state is doing going forward. One of the things that we decided was that we're operating the state without a strategic plan, which as a business person, that just seems ridiculous to me. And that was, so we developed a strategic plan, Plan Washington, and then I got into the legislature and I looked around and I said, we can't do a strategic plan because we don't know what kind of funding we've got. We have really no fiscal infrastructure to support the state. We are the most regressive state in how we tax ourselves. We're really working on, as you know, sales tax and property taxes by and large. And we're also growing extremely fast, and we're really not having a sound base, in my estimation, on the part of many people, in how we can really prepare for the future, continue to keep a great economy going. And so looking around, the plan is, how do we keep taxpayer money in the state working for the state? It seems like a really simple, basic idea. It's a nonpartisan idea. It just is, how do we grow jobs? How do we grow the infrastructure? All of which are the basis, as you people in the ports know, the basis for economic development. In addition to sitting on that committee that Michael alluded to, I also sit on the Public Works Board for the state, and I was 6 years on the CURB Board, Community Economic Revitalization, very involved in infrastructure, as you know, infrastructure and economic development. So we believe that working on this is going to help strengthen our fiscal foundation. So what's happening today, and you'll notice here I say, some of the revenue sources I'm talking about funds that are held by cities, counties, by the port organizations, as well as state funds. But state funds are down there. I'm not necessarily talking about running the state through a bank. King County, for instance, has a reserve fund of $5 billion. We've been talking to them. They've been saying, well, right now, that $5 billion sits in a large Wall Street bank. We get 1% on our money. The Wall Street bank gets 7, 8, whatever, however much profit that they can get. And they're kind of disturbed about that. So King County says, what can we do if we kept that money in the state? And that's what we're talking about, establishing a state bank where they would get their 1%, but that 8% profit would stay in the state, and we can leverage that profit, like banks do, up to 10 times. In infrastructure loans and programs. And I'm going to go through this quickly, and I'll leave out some of the things, but we are interested in infrastructure as one of the foundational things that we could possibly do, because it just makes so much sense. Has any state done this? Yes. You possibly know that North Dakota has had a bank for 100 years. It has served them very well. It's a lot of benefits to the state. They actually can use it for some things which by our own constitution we can't. So we can't lend out money to students for low-cost loans for education, although we might want to. So we're not trying to change the Constitution to enable us to do this. But it's been very beneficial for the state of North Dakota. However, as we know, North Dakota and the state of Washington are actually very different. They're very different in that they have a very stable population, relatively small population, limited number of industries, limited infrastructure needs, and they do run their entire state through their state bank. In the state of Washington, we have a large urban-suburban population, much larger than the whole state of North Dakota. It is growing rapidly. I know, talking about McCleary, one of my school districts has 400 kids, new kids, every year. That's like a new school every year. That's kind of the rate that we're seeing of people coming into the state. We also have, and are blessed with, a large diversification of industry, agriculture, high-tech, aerospace. I like to tell everybody when I talk about Washington that we're one of the few states where Walmart is not one of the top 4 employers. I think that says something about the strength of our industry. Right today, we have identified, the Association of Civil Engineers has identified over $1.8 billion of infrastructure projects that are really out there and needing support. When we look at Harvey, when we look at Irma, when we look at the things that are coming down that we see in the future, I worry about our dams and others really critical infrastructure. Right today, we probably could identify 400 shovel-ready projects for the Public Works Board that are right there that we don't have enough funds to invest in. And these are loans, these are not give-outs, these are loans at low cost. And so we see this as being limited and very specific exposure as far as the state budget is concerned. Sitting on the Public Works Board, that Public Works Assistance Account, as you possibly know, which has grown over the years and has served many communities, has been swiped 4 times for the general funds. And in this year, in fact, the loan list of $97 million, which was approved, the money for that was put into the general budget, and we are bonding monies that we're lending out at 1.2 and 2%. We're bonding at 3.85%. That drives me crazy. I don't know, that's not the way I would run a company or an enterprise. So we do need, obviously, from the Bank of North Dakota. They have had excellent experience because they have bankers in charge of the bank, people who are well vested in understanding, how to run a bank, very clearly understood mission. They don't compete with local banks and credit unions, and we feel that really is critical. During this last Great Recession, we had 500 credit union banks, 500 community banks, local banks go out of business, and they're vital to the local economies. So we do think it's very important that we have accountability and transparency in anything that we create. By the way, over half the states in the country right now have legislation on the books, are looking into creating their own state banks or some kind of public financing entity. This is work that we're building on that was begun by Senator Hasagawa a number of years ago. So we really have a good deal of background in what has gone on. We've looked at a lot of different legislation and had quite a bit of meetings on this. So our objective is to establish a bank through the legislative process, through statute, to support infrastructure and other potential needs, to really build jobs across the state and form the basis of economic development, and definitely assure that the state has more sustainable, sufficient, and a progressive revenue sources. I'm very glad that we funded McCleary. It was a challenge to really focus on that, and there was a lot of good things that were addressed. I am not totally convinced that going forward, after the bienniums, the 4 years that have been legislated in the McCleary's decisions that we've done, that we will have the money down the pike to do all the things that we want to do. So we are currently serving up $1.6 billion in debt service today. We have defined infrastructure needs. I've been working with the community and technical college system, which is so vital, in my estimation, to our kids going on to careers, successful careers, our college system. And we've been underfunding that for 15 years or more. So every time we come up with, oh, look what we did, yeah, but you've been underfunding it, cutting it back and cutting back. Our mental health system, really does not serve the state well currently. And in my community, I know that we just don't have enough funds available to train all our first responders. And these are health and safety issues as far as I'm concerned, which when I read the Constitution, said that it may not be our paramount duty, but in my mind, it's our fundamental duty as a legislature to make sure the health and safety of our residents is protected. So we're looking at public infrastructure. There's a lot of different things that we can do. I'm very concerned with, as I said, bridges and dams and water systems, making sure that they're up to speed, as well as communication lines. Across the state, I don't know specifically Whatcom County or this particular area, but I do know even in Thurston County, half of the fiber that is laid down is dark right now. We need to make sure that every kid going to school in this state can have a complete digital experience, can have access to all that's available on the internet. Otherwise, we're just perpetuating an unfair system, an unbalanced system. That's not the case today, and many kids not only don't have it in school, but they certainly can't go home and get online and really access all that the internet has to offer. So broadband is another form of infrastructure. The electrification of our automobiles as we move more and more in that direction is also something that we could be using the funds that we would generate to build out. And so we do have a Public Works Board. We have a system that's been in place that actually does due diligence on the kinds of requests for loans that come in. This is very vague because it is vague, and we're working on what is the structure of this. Is it going to be a trust fund or is it going to be a bank? How are we going to do it? Because from my perspective, this is one of the most important things in that it is not a piggy bank for the state to come in and say, oh, there's a batch of money. Let's take that and move it into the general funds. We have to be mature, we have to be grown up about this, and we have to really build a sound fiscal foundation for the state. So working forward, just to let you know, there was in 2011, there was a group that got together that really did a proviso that looked at how would we go forward with this. We're going to build on top of that. I'm here because I want to hear what you have to say, what your ideas are about this, and I'm going around to community by community. I will be at the IACC, the infrastructure conference in Wenatchee later on, and again, opening it up to lots of people involved in infrastructure to find out what they think about it, ways in which we might look at this and how we can do better. So we're moving forward. And yes, there will be opposition from large banks. And so we're making sure that we understand what that opposition might be. Frankly, I've consulted with the editors of The Economist, as well as the Harvard Business Review and the Institute for Public Financing to get some feedback on this. And frankly, what I'm being told is that there's still a lot of murky stuff in the big banks that we have no knowledge of. There's a lack of transparency. We're looking at what is happening with the second largest bank in Washington right now, where there's a major lawsuit happening as we speak. And the capital, frankly, the structure of the large banks doesn't protect our funds. If those banks go under, if they get hit with something, we're not the first to get our monies back. And we do not know what's going to happen with Glass-Steagall and with other things as far as the administration is concerned. So we don't think that the large bank is really any safer than putting it in our own state bank. So this is about the proviso, and I rushed through it, but I am very much interested in getting feedback from the audience. If anybody is interested in getting more information, I have a sheet. We'll keep you in the loop on what's going on. I'd love to have you sign in there. And I'm here because I'm going around the state. What do you think?
Commissioner Briscoe?
Well, it's a lot to digest, but I think that anytime we can keep our money at home and put it to work for the people that have put it there is a good idea. I'd like to see things move forward on this. I'd like to get more information on it.
Of course.
But with a quick glance in your very short time you've had to explain it, it appears to be a good, interesting idea. And like I say, if we can keep our money at home to work for people here, that'd be a better deal.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I will say that we've gotten the state treasurer involved, we've gotten DFI involved, so the Department of Financial Institutions involved. We're making sure to check all the boxes. At the end of the day, I want any large bank to look at it and say, holy cow, they've really got their act together, they know what they're doing, that we've attracted people with really strong backgrounds in the banking industry who know how to run banks successfully. We're trying to do our homework, which is why I'm here.
Would it be
Thank you.
fair-
I look forward to more information.
Thank
If you
you.
can get that to
Yes.
me, I appreciate it.
Would it be federally insured?
Not necessarily. We're not insuring individual funds. So basically, you are insuring the funds with the credit of the state of Washington and the people of
Not the
Washington.
federal government.
Not necessarily the federal government, but it does have to be part of the federal government system, obviously, so that we can transfer funds, around as needed. It's not open to this is not a bank where there's a teller and there's a,
Right.
okay.
So, Senator Woman, thank you so much. I would love it if the port had their money in a bank like this. It was a little more local as much as we can. Other than partisan pushback, I don't, because I know a little bit about the concept, but I don't know that there's any legal roadblock stopping the people of Washington from creating this bank. Is that right?
Well, there will need to be two bills. Right now, there's nothing that stops us, but when there is statute that talks about who can establish a bank, and the state is not listed as one of the entities. So that's one bill that we've got in the works right now to just check that box and make sure that we can, as a state, establish a bank. But beyond that, there's federal oversight that has to take place, obviously, and there's a regulatory process that we go through, and we are preparing to make sure that we check those boxes.
Sure. And then I've been looking at this really carefully lately. If you back King County out of the state's economy, the rest of the 38 counties we're bumping along. We're not, it's not terrible, but we're bumping along. So if a bank was established like this for the state of Washington and we have another recession, does this help sort of smooth out the recessive pressures? Or I mean, do you know what I'm saying? I kind of want to go into that question.
Well, and I would say probably, it did work for the Bank of North Dakota. They were able to actually lend money during the recession when other banks were not. So it really helped buffer their economy. That this would happen initially and immediately, probably not so much, quite honestly, because we'd have to get to a certain level of funds to really be able to make a significant difference. But I think that eventually it could be extremely helpful in doing that. And certainly, frankly, I'm very concerned with infrastructure in the face of what I hear from the insurance industry, from other industries, whether or not we cause climate change or whatever. We're looking at what we're seeing with the storms that we're having because of 1 degree of change on the planet. By the end of the century, we will be at 4 degrees. That's just the projection. Mm-hmm. And I know insurance companies are changing their behaviors because of what they see ahead. One of the biggest investment the federal government is making is having our armed forces. I've been attending some resilience training and et cetera. And so I know that our armed forces are doing a lot of strategizing on the basis of what will happen with water wars and what will go on with changing populations as people, move away from the coastal areas, et cetera. So I want to make sure that we can withstand our infrastructure in the state, physical infrastructure, can withstand what it needs to withstand going forward.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Did the major banks in North Dakota oppose it?
Well, this happened 100 years ago, so I don't know how many major banks there were in North Dakota
But
at the
today
time.
they don't.
Well, I have no idea. It's such an establishment and so well embedded into the whole culture of North Dakota. I think that. Yeah, I think if they were starting now from scratch, it would be the same position that we're in, where they would just oppose it. No, I did some research. I did ask a number of different financial entities whether or not if every state, the question was, if every state in the union were to do this, how much of an impact would it be on the large banks? And what I was told is minimal. That's not their major business. Nevertheless, they would oppose it.
Well, sure. 1% of $1 trillion is, yeah.
Okay, well, any other questions, Commissioner Briscoe?
No, I have none. Thank you, Senator.
Senator Wellman, how can we get more engaged in this and learn more and weigh in?
Well, thank you. One of the things, one of the things that had come to me as sitting on the Public Works Board, first of all, talking with the utility districts, sewer and water districts, they're very excited about doing this and actually had been talking about something like this by themselves, but they don't want to be bankers. The Port Association, as you probably already know, has been talking about pooling funds in some capacity. Again, do you really want the overhead? It doesn't make any sense to me to have, the utilities do it, the ports do it, the county do it, the city do it, if we can do it together, working together for the benefit of all of us. And so definitely I'm ready to have, I don't have my my URL or anything, but you can get me on, I'm listed on the internet. Let me know what you think. The same thing to people in the audience. If you want to sign up, have a video coming out, we'll have a website coming out. We need to keep people informed. We need to make sure that people provide input. I think it's really important. You're going to get some pushback from local community banks that are not too sure how this is going to work. And I was very encouraged, frankly, in talking to the people of North Dakota, or the banks of North Dakota, how much additional business their community banks were able to do, because and sometimes, there'd be a deal coming up, there's a loan for $5 million. Well, they could do 2. But stepping in as a partner on that with the Bank of North Dakota, they could come in with an additional 3. So that was a deal that they could participate in and make happen. So it actually gave them more deal flow.
See, now you're talking our language, so I think we do that here. So, fantastic.
So, and definitely, to me, this is nonpartisan. This is something that just works for everybody. So thank you so much. And, I really would love to hear from you.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come up and present this today.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Okay, our next, we have another presentation on district energy update.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Adam Fulton, Director of Facilities. Today I'd like to give you a brief update on what we're doing with district energy in the Waterfront District. Most of what you'll see today is review. However, there are a couple things we would like to update the Commission on, namely our bid strategy and our bid timing. The Commission may recall that the City of Bellingham hired the below-listed consultants led by Putman Infrastructure to study the possibilities of district energy systems down in the Waterfront District. They looked at about 38 different systems, from raw water usage to hydroelectric power generation, all the way to what we call district energy, which is the basically community heat and community cooling, these sort of things. Commission has seen this picture before. This is the distribution system as planned, coming in off of Laurel. The system progressively gets smaller out as it proceeds to the water. It has branches going east and west, and indeed that would supply the entire Waterfront District, with the one exception of the Granary Building, which our timing probably does not work for that building. The estimate's done. They're a question at hand, which the Commission doesn't need to answer today, is whether we install what are referred to as 2, 4, or 5 pipe systems. And those are all different systems. Very, very quickly, a 2-pipe system is a heating system. It's a common boiler where we make hot water, and then we ship it to the buildings where they can then mine that heat. And what it does is save them from having to have their own boilers. Similarly, a four-pipe system is just like that, but it also has a cooling system where we have a communal chillers, which make cold water, and then, again, that gets shipped out to the buildings. They mine the cold water and cool their buildings. And then five-pipe is a very rare and dynamic system where it is, in fact, that same four-pipe system, but it also has this fifth pipe that ends up doing heat shearing. You can see the estimates for the various systems. And what I'd like to inform the commission, and I think today we're just basically looking for a nod of the head that we're proceeding in the right direction, is first of all, our bid strategy. Back to their estimate, we are bidding, because it is the only system that makes financial sense, we are bidding the two-pipe option as the base bid. We will, from the contractors bidding the project, what we call additive alternates, in which will tell us what it would cost to install a four-pipe system or a five-pipe system. So we'll have all three of these estimated. However, the project is set up with the base of a two-pipe system. Our timing for bidding is we'll go out to bid this week. We want to be in conjunction and likely behind the City of Bellingham's street bid for the Granary Avenue and Laurel Street. They are out in the street now. If their bid slips, we will slip with them. We have language that overlaps, and it's important that we are in conjunction with them the whole time. So, and it's beneficial for them, for that contractor to be understood before this bids. So at this October 3rd commission meeting, providing that the bids do not slide 2 weeks, we would be doing two things. One is seeking the commission's direction on what to award, the 2, 4, or 5-pipe system, and awarding that contract, as well as we would have an amendment to the interlocal agreement we have with the city, wherein they install some of these utilities for us, not this system, but the casing for the system, the water taps for the system, and also some conduits to host fiber. Our construction would be completely timed with the city's road contractor. Yeah, that is our bid strategy. That is our bid timing. Again, we'll be back here in probably 4 to 6 weeks, looking for direction.
When you say slip, you mean it would be put out at a longer date?
Right. Many times in a bid, the agency may put out an addendum. For instance, the City of Bellingham just put out a 100-page addendum to their road project. So many times, to give the contractors fair access and familiarity to that addendum, they'll slide the bid date, say 2 weeks. And we would then just do the same to get behind their bid.
And what's the staff's recommendation at this time?
Staff's recommendation is for a two-pipe system.
Okay. If we were doing the hotel and conference center, would that change to where it looks like it would use the biggest part of it? Would you then recommend a 4-pipe system?
We would not.
Okay. Commissioner Briscoe, any questions?
Yes, several. Why is staff recommending a two-pipe system only?
Right. In this report back here, I don't know if Commissioner Briscoe has seen this, but it's multi-page, very thorough analysis of 38 different possibilities of district energy systems. There were only 2 that made financial sense to execute. One was the two-pipe system. The other had to do something to do with raw water.
Commissioner, if I can add on to that, there's a contingent of folks from Puget Sound Energy, the City of Bellingham, and the Port of Bellingham that all went up to Canada and interviewed people who had installed these systems. And the systems we visited were all two-pipe. But we did learn about a 4 or a 5-pipe system that was done in Victoria that, because of the expense of the system, actually wasn't working. And what had happened was so much was spent up front on the 4 and 5-pipe system that to buy into the system became prohibitive, and then therefore development didn't occur in that area because you were forced to buy into it. And when we talked to both the Olympic Village and I think the other was UBC, University of British Columbia, Both of them recommended a simpler, in the Northwest, a very simple two-pipe system to keep your upfront capital low and to get the thing going and get as much participation in the system as possible. So it wasn't just strictly a cost thing from our analysis. It was also our field trip that we walked away thinking the two-pipe system was better. And I think a lot of people on that tour from the city and Puget Sound Energy were going into it thinking we need to look at the all-out 4 or 5 pipe system, and not a single person came back across the border thinking that was the case. Everyone who went on that tour came back thinking a two-pipe system was a better way to go.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. And no, Adam, I have not seen that. I have not received that document that you referred to.
So you're looking for a head nod today. I guess I could head nod no to the 5-pipe system when it's $800,000 higher than the 4-pipe. For clarification, are you talking about just laying the pipe under the road now at these costs, or is it actually hooking them up? And
The commissioner's correct in the former. This is simply installing the infrastructure, i.e. the pipes, in the ground.
just to put the pipe in the ground at this time, not all the costs to hook up or any of
The
that?
commissioner's correct.
If I can just add on too, because if we're talking about 2, 4, or 5, we're bidding all of them. So we haven't picked one. We've said the base bid is on 2, and we're adding 4 and 5. But it's not like we've picked one. You're going to see costs for all 3 of this system and have more discussion, and we'll make sure we get this information circulated.
Does this document show the financial side of all of these?
Yes, sir,
at
it does.
Completion? Not
I'm
just
sorry?
this, what we're looking at here is just installing pipes.
Right.
The financial side of the whole system operating.
The commissioner's correct. That analysis is done in there. What happens is you pair the capital investment with the anticipated build-out of the property and the uses that come with that anticipated build-out. And that's what this analysis would show. And again, it all points back to this two-pipe system being a recommended system.
So I'll read it and I'll have a question. I haven't seen another. So after reading it, I'll have a question, but until I see the whole document, nothing's off the table as far as I'm concerned. But you're getting bids on all these anyway, so that's moving forward. If there was a light bulb bubble, or what do you call those? A thought bubble over my head when you said that the city might slip, I would have the eye roll emoji happening up here right now, because how much longer is this going to take just to get the roads going? Is 2 more weeks, a month? I mean, what's a 100-page addendum at this point? I mean, they're a week away from bid, so what's going on?
Yeah.
Do you know what's going on?
You know, it's difficult for me to comment on the city's bidding practices. And there is no indication that they're going to slip their bid date right now.
Okay.
However, that seems like a pretty large addendum. I wouldn't be surprised to see that.
Right. I mean, we've got a lot of stuff to do, which is we had a long discussion at our last meeting about the sub-area plan, getting that squared away before we, really move forward on anything else. And the folks that are trying to market the property to Granary can't do anything at all. So, 2 more weeks is not welcome for sure.
So you're talking the difference between a 2-pipe system and a 4-pipe system, double the price. Is the entire cost of this on the port's dime? Any on the city's?
We haven't negotiated that with the city yet as to whether it's all on the port's dime. I think largely depends on whether we charge hookup and how we recoup this from people. There's a couple different business models, I think, outlined in the information that Adam's referring to. But yeah, we'll have to bring you a little better business case before we finalize this.
And that's not in that document?
I believe it is. Yeah.
There are several different business models with private public partnerships and this sort of thing are analyzed. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I'll wait for.
Yeah, I believe it is in there. But
Yes.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
My question was, who's going to pay the cost?
Yeah, we have not determined the split between the city and the port. In some of the original proposals for the 5-pipe system, and you can see it's $1.9 million essentially, the recommendation for the person that came up with the 5-pipe system was that the city pay for $1 million and the port pay for $1 million.
Any other questions?
Not right now.
You're looking for a head nod in what way, without seeing all the numbers?
I think we're good. We're good.
that
We
kind of a
we just
head
wanted to
nod.
keep the commissioners informed so that we're in full view of the public and everyone else with our timing of our bid and our build out.
Okay. One
Great.
thing-
I can't give a head nod till I have a little more information here on what we're doing. So.
I can't see you anyway, Bobby, so I don't know if you're nodding or.
No, I'm not nodding. I want more information. I haven't seen the
I think-
document yet.
I think what we're looking for, if the commission had a problem with the road we're going down, we wanted to hear it now. And I'm not hearing anyone say they have a problem. And what I am hearing is we want to see all the options still on the table, and we have not eliminated any options yet.
Let me ask one more question before you leave the dais there. So, in my business, we look at a lot of different systems, and most of them are, for houses, some small commercial stuff. This is much larger than what I typically deal with, but on a project-by-project basis, I think I've got a pretty solid understanding of how systems are, sort of what's coming down the road, right? So there's been a lot of conversation that this district energy thing is the right thing to do for this particular part of the world, and I get it. The two-pipe system looks to me a lot like the two-pipe system I saw when I was a little kid. In a cold climate, you see these two silver pipes, crossing the landscape. I don't see that there's much difference. So the two-pipe systems have been in use for probably 100+ years, I'm going to guess, and yet we're going to suggest doing that here. Doesn't seem like the most modern solution. Building by building. Has that been discussed as part of this whole process as well? And not doing the district energy, but relying on, better building practices and new individual systems where, for example, you're going room by room with a system that's very efficient as opposed to a system that's trying to answer everything for everybody.
I think where some of the modernization comes in is when you actually hook it up to some of the sources of energy, and things like using sewer heat to heat a building is where the modernization and the new technology comes into play. But you're right, there's nothing sexy or modern about putting two pipes in the ground underneath the street. That's been happening forever. And we have a district energy system right here in our community. It's up at Western.
That's a two-pipe system?
I believe so.
Yeah, they pipe steam around.
And that was put in back in the 60s. It's
Yep.
still going.
They need a new one.
So the one concern that we have to have when we're looking at this, well, one, depending on who pays the cost. But the other is we could get the price so high to lease these buildings with this that we don't get people to lease them because they're too expensive. So that's what we've got to weigh as we move forward. And the general public should understand that as well. And especially, it would be different if all the buildings were coming online at once. Someone's going to have to carry that capital cost while they sit there waiting for those buildings to come online.
That would be us.
And when you're looking back at Barclay taking 20 years to get where they are today, that's going to be a long time that you carry that capital cost. So if your head nod you're looking for is you're going down the right path, that's an affirmative head nod.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner Briscoe?
No, I just want to make sure that we think about the future, and it's very evident as we look around this, particularly this summer, at the heat problems we have. So I want to make sure that what we put in, this commission is not going to be talked about in 20 years about, well, why didn't the dummies do it this way and do it better so we had heating and cooling? I mean, the cost is there no matter, somebody's going to have to pay for it no matter what. And somebody may have to carry it, but I want to make sure we do the right thing here and that we do it looking into the future, not just looking at present time. So that's where I'm at on it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just quickly on that, the facilities we visited had air conditioning. It just wasn't done through the district heating or district utility system. There was just an independent air conditioning system in each individual building. And it wasn't just the cost of the pipes that made them go that route. It was also the efficiency of being able to cool a building. And this was on the Olympic Village, which had, I don't know, several thousand units hooked up to it on day one. So that's one of the takeaways we walked away from was, they didn't even want a 4 or 5 pipe system. They didn't want the ability to cool on a district-wide basis. They wanted individual building control on their cooling.
Okay, no other questions, Commissioner Briscoe?
No, none.
Commissioner McCauley? Okay, thank you very much, Adam. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you, Commissioners.
So we come to our 5 o'clock break at 5:30, and we're supposed to reconvene at 5:30. Do we want to break or keep going, gentlemen?
I'm good.
Good to keep going?
Yep.
You good to keep going, Commissioner? Okay. Small, anyone sign up for public comment? I don't think anyone did for the second time around back there. No? Okay. No public comment item. We have our first action item, if you could, Lindsay.
Authorize the executive director to transfer $44,771.49 from project number 107-707, Dodd Building Demolition, to project number 107-689, Rehabilitate North and South Piers, and execute change order number 1 to add the Schedule B bid additive to the contract with American Construction of Tacoma, Washington for the Blaine Harbor Marine Structure Repairs, Phase 2, in the amount of $113,925 for a total authorized contract amount of $1,013,314.06.
Good evening, Commissioners. Greg Nickel, Project Engineer. The Blaine Marine Structures Phase 2 repairs was awarded to American Construction on June 6th, and that award included 5 schedules of work and 1 bid additive. The scope of work included repairs, the second phase of repairs to the north and south piers, the second phase of repairs to the Sawtooth Pier, replacement of all of the remaining utility hangars in Gate 3, and construction of the new pump-out floats in Gates 1 and 2. That bid also included a second bid additive, which would have done some additional repairs to the north and south piers. Due to some funding limitations at that time, that bid additive was not awarded. Since award, we have identified a project, the Dodd Building Demolition Project, was completed under budget, and there was remaining funds available that could be used to supplement the North and South Piers budget in order to add the bid additive for that schedule of work. Therefore, we're requesting authorization to award change order number 1 in the amount of $113,925, which requires that additional funding to fully fund that budget item. The work included in that change order would include upgrades to the electrical system on the South Pier, strapping of some of the fender piles that have become detached from the 2 piers, replacement of cross bracing to improve the seismic stability of both structures, installation of new bull rail on the South Pier, and replacement of 6 deteriorated fender piles on both piers. And while I have your ear, I'll go ahead and give you a quick update as to where we're at with the project. The project is currently on schedule despite some significant delays in material procurement. American Construction is working hard to finish the north and south piers prior to the September 24th deadline so that both piers will be available for tenant use for the upcoming fishing season. The Sawtooth Pier work is scheduled to occur entirely during October. We had previously discussed doing the pile driving during September, but that's been pushed off, so the Sawtooth Pier will be entirely unencumbered throughout the month of September. The Gate 3 utility hangars is scheduled to occur primarily in November, and as Mike Hogan previously touched on, due to some uncertainties with the state funding, the Gate 1 and 2 pump-out floats is currently on hold. Are there any questions?
Commissioner Briscoe, any questions?
No, just glad to see things are moving forward. Thanks on that.
Commissioner McCauley?
The pump out floats, what's the scope of work that Hogan, you said 750,000 from the state?
200,000, I believe it was 75%.
Okay, okay.
It's 205.
So the total, what was the total project cost on, just for the floats?
Just for the floats, I don't have those numbers immediately in front of me. I think it was in the $250,000 range.
So did the state money just cover the pump outs? So we're
That-
we're doing the floats on our own?
No, my understanding is that covered 75% of the entire project cost for the pump outs.
Is
Yeah,
there,
the state clean water grant was for 75% of the pump out, the new pump outs that were going to go on gate 1 and 2. So the estimated grant was $175,000.
okay. Is there some work that we can do? Obviously, we've got our portion of the money available. Is there some work we can do that would prepare us for the future, assuming that this is going to happen down the road?
There could conceivably be some procurement that could be done for pump out equipment. I'd have to check on pricing for that equipment, excluding the floats. I don't believe that we could get the floats in for that price, but I can check on that as well. But as far as installation, it's kind of a all or none type of
Okay.
scenario.
Okay. Thanks.
The question I had was on we call this the North Pier Fuel Dock and the South Pier Dock, South Pier. We are repairing both those docks, but we're not putting any fuel infrastructure in, are we?
No, quite frankly, that's a little bit of an old image that retained the
Okay.
fuel pier
So it's
notation.
repair
It's
the two piers.
correct.
Okay, thank you, just for clarification. Okay, any other questions, Commissioner Briscoe?
No, none.
Commissioner McCauley?
No.
That was a slow no.
Well, I was just thinking, what would happen if we made the North Pier longer?
That's a big question.
It cost a lot of money.
Well, all right.
It would be longer.
It would be, yeah, that's what would happen. It would be longer. All right. See that?
Okay.
That's a bug in your ear. It's going to happen in 7 years.
Okay, hearing no other comments, all those in favor of action item 1?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. Thank you very much, Greg.
Thank you.
I should have you should read action item number 2.
Yes,
Did I have you read action item 1?
you did.
I did, okay.
Really long.
It was long. Letter A, a motion by the Port Commission to create a new capital improvement project in the amount of $65,595 for the Bellingham Shipping Terminal for the purchase and assembly of a grain hopper extension. Letter B, a motion by the Port Commission authorizing the executive director to execute a purchase with a single source provider for the purchase of a grain hopper extension for use at the Bellingham Shipping Terminal.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chris Clark, Business Development Manager. I'd like to speak to these two items. I've got a couple of pictures here. Lindsay, can you help? Which, Chris C?
Yellow.
Oh, here we go. Okay, that's it. This is to illustrate, the first item here is that is the hopper extension. And this is used, both of these items are concern the grain unloading that's going to happen later this month. And as you can see, this one here is needed to receive the cargo that's being unloaded from the vessel. That's it'll be dumped from the ship into the hopper and the hopper extension, and it'll go into the hopper, and then it'll go in the conveyor to the warehouses. So this is a custom item that's being built for us. We requested several vendors to come up with proposals. We got only one from the vendor who's currently doing this in Olympia. And this is custom in that the hopper itself, part of the hopper is going to extend over the bull rail and bridge part of the 15 feet that we have to deal with. So that's the nature of the custom item. And then actually you can see on the top, we also have basically the vents that can cut down on the dust and the residue. Now, that's not something that's required for the first shipment. However, additional shipments, we believe that the city and the state will require that. So we're kind of thinking ahead and putting those vents on the top there.
So those vents are just to blow the dust down?
Well, the vents, actually, this mechanism on the bottom connects with the vents and sucks the dust
Sucks the dust.
out of there. That's
So
correct.
is that's an open hopper?
It's an open hopper.
How's that work in wetter Washington?
They don't unload during the rain. It stops.
So can't unload a ship anytime it's raining?
Well, that's the request of the consignee, that the unloading stops, and it's at their expense, of course, when the unloading stops, because they don't want the grains to collect moisture, because they're concerned that during the storage time, they'll get moldy in the warehouse. So during times of precipitation, they shut the hatches on the vessel, and they wait until it gets dry. But actually, that's fine with us. The longer the ship stays, the more wharfage and service and facility
Pray
that
for
we
rain.
get. So,
But it can rain here the whole month of October. The first ship's coming in, what, September 23rd?
28th now,
28th now.
correct.
So if it's raining all of October, they're in trouble.
Well, they're in trouble, but we benefit ourselves. And actually, this has been going on in Olympia for several years. So moisture it's nothing new to them in this part of the world.
Okay? Didn't mean to get too deep in the weeds there.
Oh, no, we welcome that,
Let's
Commissioner.
go deeper in talking about dryers then.
Dust suckers, is that what I heard correctly?
I beg your pardon, Commissioner?
Did you say that sucks the dust or blows the dust down?
No, it'll suck the dust out into that mechanism on the dock itself, that red
Okay.
vehicle.
Okay.
Any further questions, Commissioners?
That's the end of your presentation?
On item one,
Oh, yeah,
yes.
Keep going, okay. No other question there.
Okay. So, Lindsay, item two, have you read that one?
I think we need a vote if we're done with.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
I thought you
Commissioner.
had other pictures there on this same.
No, I've got other pictures, but of the conveyor system.
So, Chris, I do have a question. We're going to have an extension leading out over close to the ship, which is a good addition. Will the sideboards on the hopper, is this the exact hopper that we're looking at?
No, this is not the exact hopper. This is a hopper that was custom built for Olympia. The hopper that we have will differ in nature in that it will be essentially it'll be longer and narrower, allowing it to extend out over the bull rail.
And how successful have they been with clearing the dust using this setup like this?
Well, they've been very successful.
And they have a permit for their air quality on this one?
Well, in Olympia, they were required to have a permit. We're not required to have a permit as of yet.
Well, that's okay, because if this is satisfying their permit, then when we get one, if we need to get one, then we'll be okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
Commissioner.
okay.
So we will end up owning this hopper?
That's correct, Commissioner.
This isn't one we're going to rent.
No, sir.
And,
This is being custom built for us if you approve item number 2.
right, so we'll keep, just clarification here, and we're going to keep, so how much are we going to make on this first shipload of product?
Well, when all is said and done, we'll probably make at least $50,000 to $60,000. However, if it rains, we'll make more than that.
Right, we're all going to pray for rain, I got that. But so this first go-around won't quite break even.
Oh, we'll make money on it because we'll make money on the wharfage and the service and facility charges
I see.
that we charge the vessel.
Okay, okay. Very good. Any further questions, Commissioner Briscoe?
No, I have none.
Commissioner McCauley?
Only one on this, the vacuum system, will we be renting that machine?
If we need to for subsequent unloadings, we will.
Okay. So it won't be used for this first ship,
No, Commissioner.
okay? And will we be looking at we'll be looking at the dust situation to decide if we need to use it in the future? Is that kind of the plan?
Yes, Commissioner, that's the
Okay.
plan.
All right. And as far as rain goes, has there been a discussion about not stopping in the rain and using a dryer further up on the conveyor system closer to the warehouse?
It's not our prerogative.
Okay.
It's the prerogative of the customer.
Okay.
Just for the record, that was 2 questions, but that's okay.
It's one,
you have another
so it's
one?
one question, series
Oh,
of questions
please.
about one topic.
Yeah.
How about that?
So, but I have a question now that was brought up. Why are we not using the dust sucker, I'll call it, on the first time we're offloading the ship?
We have an exemption, Commissioner.
Okay. So we're just going to wait and see if the dust blows all around and everybody gets upset, or is it going to be on site, or what?
Well, it's one of these things, we'll just have to see how it goes the first time. I suspect there may be some comment from the community when they see a huge cloud of dust out there, or if they do. So we're being prudent in including the dust vents in the purchase.
Right, but we won't have the actual sucking part of it on site. Is that something we rent?
That's something that we would rent in the future. That red machine there.
Okay, do they use that all the time at Olympia?
Yes, Commissioner.
I guess I'm troubled with the fact that we're going to try this without it, and maybe possibly create a problem with the community right off the bat. I don't know if that's such a good idea.
Well, we do have an exemption, and we're not required to do it the first time, Commissioner.
I understand that. I understand the exemption. I understand that, but I'm wondering if that's good. A good way to go. So that's my only comment. Thank you.
Certainly.
Okay. Commissioner McCauley, you've said you only had one. Any more?
Save the last one for the next one.
Okay. Hearing none other, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye. So Lindsay, if you could, action item 3.
Okay. Letter A, a motion by the Port Commission to increase equipment rental operating budget in the amount of $102,518 for the Bellingham Shipping Terminal to rent grain receiving and conveying equipment with the option to purchase. Letter B, motion by the Port Commission authorizing the executive director to execute a rental agreement with a single source provider for the rental of grain receiving and conveying equipment for use at the Bellingham Shipping Terminal.
Commissioners, if I can illustrate exactly what it is that we're renting, that's the conveyor that would convey the grain from beneath the hopper into the warehouse. And this is a picture of another conveyor in the warehouse dumping it into what's called a reach stacker, which puts it into kind of a big pile. And the third picture is actually, it's a picture of one of the conveyors, kind of in the idle state, so you can see how it folds up. What we would do is, once we complete the operation, we would fold them up and store them. Further to the request, there's a request in next year's budget for the purchase of these containers. So this will give you a basic idea of what we're talking about. The system that we're going to use In Bellingham, we're going to modify to some extent in that the stevedore contractor is considering also using trucks to dump the cargo in and then drive to the furthest warehouse, depending upon the circumstances.
So we're going to rent it for $102,000, but the Sunrise will bear the rental cost of 90% of that.
Sunrise will bear the cost of $71,000.
That 71 is part of the 102 or in addition to?
No, that's minus the 102.
Okay. So we're going to have 30,000 of the 102.
That's correct, Commissioner. However, if we exercise the option to purchase 90% of the rental cost, and half of the transportation will go towards the purchase. So I roughly calculate that, again, it depends upon what we choose to, if we choose to, and what we choose to eventually purchase, that we could, over 8 ships, this will be paid for, and then we will be able to continue to charge Sunrise for the use of this equipment over time. So in approximately 2 years, all this equipment will be paid for, and then we can continue to charge the customer.
So we have to make that decision if we're going to buy it or rent it within 2 months
That is correct, Commissioner.
of the use of it.
If you want to get
It's not raining for those 2 months.
well, it's at the 90% over 2 months. If you choose to wait for 4 months, then it falls to 80%.
Okay, got it. Commissioner Briscoe, any questions?
Yeah, a couple. What's the cost of that piece of equipment if we want to buy it?
It depends upon, it's approximately $600,000, depending upon exactly what you purchase. And again, this is all swappable. If we buy from the same vendor, we can get, for example, this has a 36-inch belt. You could probably get a 42-inch belt if you wanted to for about the same price. The idea behind the purchase is that we would use this for other cargoes in the future, and that's why we want to be a little bit flexible as far as the belt size and the exact equipment.
Can you go back?
No, that's fine.
Can
I
you
just
go-
wanted to know what the cost was. The other question I had is wasn't brought up for the last accident was how much is it to rent the and I'm going to call it the dust sucker. How much is it to rent the dust sucker for each unloading?
It's about $5,000. There's a company in Tacoma that owns that mechanism, and that's approximately what it costs. Again, it depends, however, on the weather. Okay, so if we do have several weeks of rain, then it's gonna extend that out. Okay, so the 5,000 is for about 2.5 weeks. But if it takes longer, it's going to cost twice as much.
Okay, very good. That's the only questions I have. Thank you.
But the additional rent should offset that.
More than enough, yes,
So we still
Commissioner.
want rain. Let's see, I guess I don't have any other questions. You, Commissioner?
Yeah. So at our first budget meeting this year, which was your first budget meeting with us, I asked you for your wish list, and thank you very much for getting that to the commission, because it was really enlightening on sort of the direction that we might want to go. Clearly, we not just might want to go, but are going to go, at least with this particular purchase and rental agreement. So I'm excited on the one hand, and on the other, I'm a little nervous. The risk is fairly low, especially since the ship is already on its way here. So, barring good weather or bad weather, then it'll be here soon, and that's good news. But past commissions didn't do this, And I'm often wondering why past commissions did what they did. And past commissions, I wouldn't say wrote off the shipping terminal, but were going a different direction. They weren't buying equipment. The last commissioner that spoke to us tried to talk us out of buying a crane. So why they didn't do this does give me some pause.
We didn't have the depth. The ship coming in
Yeah.
wouldn't have fit with the
Well,
depth we had.
but they could have dug it out, before as well, but weren't. So, given the amount of money we're putting into this, with the relative certainty that we're going to get it back, I'm not uncomfortable at all in going this direction. So the excited hand is the big foam hand waving with the number 1 on it over here, because I think this is definitely the right way to go. And rental up front makes sense. We might want to make some changes before we buy anything, so I'm okay with that. And
It's rental with an option to buy.
rental with an option to buy. So I think that's a smart way forward, and we'll just roll with it and see what happens, because it's a first for us, so. Yeah.
Can you go back to the picture before this for a moment, please? Or maybe 2 before it. Oh, 1 more before that. So is that covered all the way into the warehouse?
Yes, Commissioner.
But in the warehouse, it's not covered?
There's no need in the
So there's a little
warehouse.
dust blowing around in there, but not getting it to there. I mean, there'll still be some, but not a lot.
Correct, Commissioner.
Okay. The only dust will be coming off the top of the hopper.
That's right, Commissioner.
Okay. Any other, Commissioner McCauley just gave a thumbs up, Commissioner Briscoe. You couldn't see that. Do you have any other questions?
So I can see it. I have video here. I can see it. It
Oh.
took a little long. I'm a little behind when you get to see it, but I saw everything. No, I have no further questions. And I'd just like to say, Chris, that very happy to have you on board and very excited about the progress you're making with our shipping terminal. And big kudos to you.
Ditto. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that.
Commissioner McCauley, anything else?
One final question. The ship arrives when?
The 28th.
28th of September.
That's correct.
That's assuming it's not coming through the next hurricane.
It's headed right towards it.
it's-
It's headed right towards it right now.
Well, it's practically at Panama, so it's going to avoid that,
It's
fortunately.
ahead of it.
That's correct.
Good news.
Ahead of it.
Well, the hurricane's over here and Panama's over here, and the ship's kind of over
Irma's
here
gonna
now.
chase it down.
Okay.
Ahead of it's a good thing. You always want the wind at your back.
Especially when you're stuck in a canal.
Okay, hearing no other questions. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye. So thank you very much. Let the record show that passes 3-0. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you,
And I
Commissioners.
too, I like to see the activity. I hope we get a lot more, especially if there's other products we can bring in like this. It'd be great.
Thank you, Commissioners. We appreciate your support.
So now we're to new business. Commissioner Briscoe, do you have any new business?
No new business here. I'll save it for the 19th.
Commissioner McCauley, any new business?
Briscoe's back on the 19th. Sculpture Northwest, I think Sculpture Northwest has talked to both Dan and I, but Commissioner Briscoe, you're still away, but I'm sure they'll talk to you when we get back. So Sculpture Northwest has thrown a proposal to the Port of Bellingham regarding some, I think it's 12 steel sculptures that they may get access to, and they need some place to keep them while they raise money to rehabilitate them. There's a whole pitch that they're making. Definitely want to share it with Rob and Dan. I think you've heard it already.
I've heard the pitch. I haven't
Yeah.
seen the pictures.
Yeah, oh, here, I'll show you the pictures. So the general gist of it is these 12 sculptures, I believe, are owned right now by Mr. David Syrie. And if the deal goes through with Sculpture Northwest, they'll take ownership of them. They'll store them, rehabilitate them. I think they're all steel. They're all pretty big. And I don't know where they are right now. They seem to be in the photos in a bunch of different places. So the deal would be for us, at the port, is we could certainly display them until each one was rehabilitated, and then the port would have first dibs on one of the sculptures at the end of it as a thank you for doing the deal. So definitely want to follow up on that and see if we can do something with Sculpture Northwest, and especially because essentially we get to have them host them. Doesn't cost us any money. We get a bunch of cool sculptures to sit around for a while. So just want to bring that up.
I never like getting ahead of the staff on something like this. I'd rather have them see it first. I didn't, when I met with the folks, it was very, very preliminary. And just what would you think about this? And I sent them to the staff. But I guess my question, if you talk to them in a little more detail, who's going to pay? What cost does the port have? They weren't sure at the time.
I did ask that question. I don't know that there's any cost to the port, just hosting them, basically just providing space.
No transportation costs?
I wouldn't be in favor of that anyway, but I think there may be some sort of transactional cost at the very end of the day for one of the sculptures, but I don't know what that would be.
Who's the best contact for me on this?
Yeah, I think Drake, George is I can get you his contact info.
He's out of country for a while, but when he said he wouldn't get those pictures till after he got back. Maybe he is back now. I don't
I
think
don't
so.
know. I got those from Wade Marla, who works with Sculpture Northwest as well.
So George Drake is who I discussed it with. But I guess you're looking for a nod that the staff should,
No, I'd
take a look at it?
Yeah, I'd just like to have Rob take a look at it and see if there's something that we can do with them. What really piqued my interest was that they could be displayed, especially it would be, on the waterfront. We essentially just provide space and we get free art, until eventually they disappear, but it doesn't cost us anything to do that, so.
I'll reach out to Mr. Drake and get some details.
Okay.
okay, I agree. That's good. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Great. I have nothing new, so we're adjourned.